Welcome in to another edition of Inside Carolina's On the Beat. I'm Tommy Ashley. That's John Bauman. That is, wait a minute now. You're moving stuff around, John. You're
Oh,
confusing me.
sorry.
That's Adam Smith. No glasses, Adam Smith. Didn't even recognize you, man.
Got the contacts on, baby.
Nice. I need some bifocal contacts. I'm at that age, so I have to wear these $20 readers. And then, of course, Evan Rogers, the young and upcoming star of this show. We bring him in. Jeremiah on assignment in Charlotte. If you have not taken a second to check out Inside Carolina's coverage, Women's ACC Basketball Media Day today in Charlotte. Jeremiah all over it. Tomorrow, Adam will be on his way to join Jeremiah in Charlotte for complete coverage of the men's side of things. They do it a little differently. So they split it up. They do it together, but split it up. So women's today, coverage all over Inside Carolina. Tomorrow, the men's. We're, of course, sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. The title sponsor of this podcast. Adam, the first comment in the chat was this. I hope you all can talk me off the ledge. This team is different from last year's team. I'm going to say it felt like it was different until Saturday night. Is there any cause for concern, or is it just a one-off?
Oh God, how long do we have?
1 hour.
It sounded like we were leading into a Dabo Swinney suicide watch comment. Where whoever that was talked me off the ledge. Oh God, I see Ross Martin in the chat. Look at this.
Oh my Lanta! Don't get flustered. Don't get flustered.
Business is picking up. Goodness
Must
gracious.
be boring and pretty boring time up there in Ann Arbor, Ross.
Hey, I got to tell you, I'm sure you know this.
Wait a minute. Is he stealing signs for Clemson? Is he scouting early and stealing signs?
He was guarding Phil Longo. He was impersonating Jefferson Boaz and protecting Phil Longo when Longo was calling the plays. You got to give Ross credit. The guy is consuming IC products all the way in the Great White North. He's always hitting me and John up. Telling us, giving us a breakdown of the podcast. I do get a little upset when he doesn't read my stories, but he's never going to read my stories. That's okay. As long as he just listens to the podcast, that's fine. I'm still waiting on him to read the Tamari Fox story. He's not going to do it. He's just not going to do it. But
that might be the best one you've done.
Well,
it's up there.
Man, I mean, yeah, I think it's cause for concern. I mean, can I say both? I think it could be they can make it a one-off. But it was interesting. We were all there Monday, and Mack is rolling through the list of teams. They're no longer unbeaten, obviously. And he says, UNC is one of 10 one-loss teams in Power 5, which is true. And he's saying, here are some of the teams: Texas, Alabama, Oregon, Utah, Penn State. And that's all well and good. It's completely true. But those teams lost to some real heavy hitters. Oregon lost to Washington. Alabama lost to Texas. Texas lost to Oklahoma on the final play of the game. I mean, these are all like heavyweights. And they didn't lose to 1-5 Virginia at home as a 23.5 point, 24-point favorite. So, he left that part out, which, that's what I was thinking as he was saying it. But I don't know. I mean, you got to hit the reset button here, don't you? Like full reset now, do you think, Tommy? What
Absolutely.
Would you say?
Well, I think that, it always caught me, and I want to get both of y'all's opinion this. It always coach them hard after a win, right? You bust their rear ends after they win. It's always easier to do that. But I'm around teenagers. I'm around college-age students a lot. It's hard to get it through their heads that if you don't do it the correct way, you're going to lose. And, you can coach me hard after the Miami game and say, we weren't good here, here, and here, and here. And what's my immediate thought? We beat Miami, coach. And so I think as far as the reset button, that's where it comes in a game like this, a game that Virginia – to their credit, they came in ready to play.
Right.
And they did what they had to do. And look, I'll freely admit it beforehand. It was tough for me to be anti-Virginia, what that program's gone through. And So I wasn't going to bash them and say they sucked and all that stuff that a lot of people did. And then they came in there and proved they didn't suck, and they beat North Carolina. So, yes, Adam, I think it's a complete reset, and it's a complete wake-up call for a program that can make it a one-off. If they do it the right way, they can make that a one-off. Going to Atlanta is not an easy place to do that. Evan, get in here. You're muted, man. You don't need to mute. You don't breathe heavy. You're not too old, and where you like murmur and grumble when we're talking. Evan, you're one of those guys. You're one of this young crowd. Can you truly get it? Can you truly get it until it actually steps up and smacks you in the face?
Probably. I mean, honestly, no. I mean, I think, all the things that Cedric and Drake and Corey talked about and cautioned about through the week, at the end of the day, you don't really know if it's, just coaches speak or something along those lines, or if it's something that really resonates. And I think it takes a loss to a team like Virginia for sometimes for the messages and the reality to sink in. And I think it's interesting. I remember early on in the game, I think it was the first quarter, I leaned over to Adam after maybe a drive or two on offense, after some of those early deep shots UNC were taking. And I was like, is UNC getting too fat and happy in terms of, they've got Tez Walker back. They have this inferior opponent on the outside looking in. This could appear to be a game to quote unquote get Drake May's stats up in terms of accolades and along those lines. So I was really interested in that. So I went back and looked, and on passes of 20 yards or more down the field, Drake was 3 of 11 on Saturday night, 27%. And if you go through week by week, how many 20 plus passing attempts Drake has, it goes 6, 3, 9, 5, 6, 4. So outside of that Minnesota game where he threw 9 deep balls, which was the first game Nate McCollum was kind of fully incorporated in there, Saturday night was almost double the amount of deep passing attempts Drake May had throughout the year. And Mack said on Monday that one of the goals of the week was to get Amari and Hampton the ball. And when you see those numbers, it makes you really question what was the plan? What was the mindset coming into this game?
And tell them about UVA's rushing defense, Evan. Tell them. I mean, you told them in the opponent preview, but remind them.
Right. I mean, that was statistically the second worst rushing defense in the conference. Giving up over 200 plus yards a game. And Saturday night, UNC ran for 143 yards on 29 attempts. For comparison, William and Mary ran for 147 yards on the ground 2 weeks prior. So there's a lot of things. Yeah. So there were a lot of things when you go back and look at this game, I think are really good points of reflection from both the players and a coaching standpoint. And it's going to be interesting in terms of, is this a one-off or is this something that they can bounce back from? It's kind of a dumb answer, but I really don't know. And we're going to find out on Saturday. I mean, I think it's cliche to say, but Saturday is going to be the most revealing game up to this point in the season. You're really going to learn a lot about what this team is made of and what this team can potentially do. Because as they've been saying this whole week, every goal they had at the beginning of the year is still on the table, which is true. But if you lose on Saturday, those goals are probably gone.
Oh, it might be bad if they lose Saturday.
Yeah, I mean,
it's already bad, but
I'm gonna go ahead and tell y'all I hadn't mentioned it. Tuesday is Halloween. I don't know if we're doing a Halloween on the beat. We might have to do it either Monday night or Wednesday night. We've got to do it or we will get fined, but I don't think it's going to be Tuesday night. And if they lose, I might be on Frank Street Tuesday night, reliving the glory days. Do they still do that up there? Do they still have Halloween on Franklin Street? Good Lord. There was, I thank God that my children are in an environment where they're fairly safe, because if they were in the environment where we grew up in Chapel Hill times, I'm not sure how we're all here to this day, to be honest with you. But I digress.
The worst night of my life. I have lived 40 plus years. The worst night of my life to this point, hope it stays that way, was Halloween 1998 on Franklin Street. And it was the worst night of my life. So anyway, continue, Tommy.
I was trying to think.
No, I can't do it. I mean,
that's
there were
quite the tease.
Story time with Adam.
I mean, it was not good. It was not good.
Like Garrett says in the chat, back in my day,
Yeah.
I can tell you that there was a lot of one of the funniest stories, and I'll tell it real quick. There was two. There was somebody that was dressed up as the Brooklyn Bridge with a friend of theirs, and they had like a refrigerator box, and it was probably 6 or so feet between them, but it was nice. They spent a lot of time doing that. Did not make it through the night. Got karate chopped down by a friend of mine who's very prominent now. I won't call a name. And then you remember Fruit of the Loom, the fruits, like the apple and the whatever, but somebody was the grape.
TA.
Yes.
The tidy whities.
Somebody was the grapes, a batch of grapes. Those balloons didn't make it through the night. It was just thank God they did not have cell phones back then with cameras. It would have been ugly. But anyway, let's get us back on course to the point about rushing the ball. And this is
back to rushing.
Yeah, back to running the ball. I don't want to belabor last week because I think they've moved on. But Evan, to your point, Virginia ran it 54 times. And until that game, North Carolina was doing a great job at stopping the run. Virginia obviously saw something that they could exploit, and they did it repeatedly. That's the question I asked Chip Lindsey. We all screaming, give them Marion the ball, give them Marion the ball. Is it that easy to just change everything up? And he said, no, you got to be who you are. And I said, is that because the players do this all week? And he said, yeah, exactly. We can't just switch up midstream. But, Adam, they did that against Minnesota in the second half against Minnesota, fourth quarter against Minnesota.
Salted the game away. And
just ran it down their throats. And that's what's the frustrating part watching this team. Yeah, the mea culpas after the fact are fine. But at some point, and this is on Mack, and he said it, over under on how many times they said it's on me between the three of them. I think it was 12 plus. But, Adam, they just did not adjust to the things that were working. And that is mind-blowing. That's what worries people the most because we've seen it before last year.
Yeah, it's if you really, you covering the game. You guys, you and John were out there in the crowd, and we're up there in the press box, and, you're kind of surprised that it's happening. And then when it happens and you sort of take a step back, it's all pretty shocking, honestly, to think about it. I think it was 2.5 minutes into the second half. UNC scored to go up 24-14. Omari and Hampton had 102 yards rushing at that point. And this was like 2.5 minutes into the second half, 3 minutes in the second half, like 12-minute mark of the third quarter. He was at 102. I mean, he's on pace for 200 at that point. He carried the ball 3 more times the rest of the game. Now, obviously, UVA ball controlled them. That has a lot to do, with limiting your opportunities. And then at a certain point, you're behind and you're trying to catch up. But yeah, it's pretty wild to think about. Today's Tuesday, and it's still kind of crazy to think this dude ran for 197 on Miami. He's the leading rusher in the ACC. He's one of the leading rushers in the country. It's hard to put a finger on it. I saw someone in the chat say, I don't want to see another pass on first down. I felt like where it all crystallized, was the drive where, and correct me if I'm wrong here, guys, but I think it was after Hollins fumbles out of the end zone for the touchback, and it looked like Carolina was done for there, but oh my God, they've got this new life. They're still only down 4. I think it was 450. Yep, I got it right here. 450. Yes. 33-yard pass to Doc Chapman on first down. 29-yard pass to Tez Walker. They have gone from their own 20 to Virginia's 18-yard line. And at that point, I remember, it's great covering games with Jeremiah and Evan because, we just have a fantastic just conversation going up there. And at that point, 1st and 10 on the Virginia 18, I was like, they're going to win this game. Like the football gods had gave them the Hollins fumble on the goal line out of the end zone. I just felt like that was like a football gods moment, where it's just like, okay, Carolina's going to stay unbeaten. Carolina's going to be 9th or 8th in the country. They're going to get out of this thing. It's going to be a lesson, and they're going to keep on rolling. But what was it, Evan? 4 incompletions, from the 1st and 10. No.
No, it was an RPO on the first down. And if you go back and watch it, Marion had a hole on the left side. I mean, I think Drake said he might score on that play. And if you go back and watch, I don't know if he does that, but I definitely think it's potentially a 4, 5, 6 yard gain. It was interesting. You had mentioned that point in the game where they went up, I think 10 points, little into there at the third quarter. From that point on, Amarian had 3 carries the rest of the game. Yeah. And talking about the idea of not changing your game plan, and you kind of have to just go with what you are and what you've prepped throughout the week. The one game that I actually remember when they kind of shifted gears was that App State game. After halftime of that game, Mack had kind of mentioned, like, we just need to start running the ball. And in the second half, and I guess in the overtime periods, which I know is a little bit extra time for Amari to get carries, he had 18 carries against App State in that time period when they really kind of focused on getting him involved. So just across the board, it's kind of something that I think is going to have a lot of people scratching their head for a long time.
It cannot happen again. That's the thing. If it happens again, like Jason Staples said, it was a systematic failure across the board. And I think Jason said it in another thing is you can stink in one phase of the game and still win. You can sometimes stink in 2, but you can't stink in all 3 in college football. And Carolina managed to stink in all 3 and had a rough coaching night. That is the recipe for losing to a Virginia team that had only beat William and Mary. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I definitely did want to hit on the special teams. Just to close out the thought, Adam, you were talking about Drake May in the fourth quarter as well. I think this game really eroded, for me, Drake's sense of invincibility or inevitableness in the fourth quarter. You think about Drake, he started out at UNC 6-0 in one-score games. And last year, early on in the season, he was just so dynamite in those moments. You think about driving the ball down the field against Duke.
Yep.
But since that 6-0 start, he's now 1-4 in one-score games. And of course, now that's not totally all on Drake. There's a number of different factors there. But when we started out and we were watching Drake, it just felt like every single time in those late game scenarios, he would deliver. And he did the first 6 times. Now it feels like he's come back down to earth a little bit. I thought the same thing. I thought that last drive that they were going to take the ball down. And, to have a truly special season, you need a few breaks to go your way along the way. And that would have been the break of all breaks, that fumble out of the end zone for Virginia. For North Carolina to go to the college football playoff, that's the sort of thing that you probably need to have happen once throughout the year. And they just didn't get it done in the fourth quarter and on that last drive. And you end up with a very tight loss.
John, great stat. I don't know if TA, you got any graphics where you can do confetti or something?
I don't know.
John,
I'm sitting there thinking
stat about the 1-score Drake May, and you're right. I love the stat. Shout out John.
And just I'm gonna tease something a little bit. John's gonna be more prominently featured in some stuff that we're doing here at Inside Carolina. I don't want to spoil it. Don't want to get out over the skis, but the man right there just lays it down on these type shows and this type role. That's a pretty incredible stat, right? It's Greg Barnes is a big stat guy. John, you pushing Greg for some stats there, and I think the thing is about that, and this is what, and I want to get into the Georgia Tech, the deal with it is they might not play well against Georgia Tech, Adam, but the coaching staff has got to figure out a way to drag this team across the finish line if they do not. You can't promise your players are going to play together and play great every game. But the grown-ups in the room have to be there. What did you take away from listening to Chizik and Lindsay and Mack on Monday in that regard? Because it was a lot of that's on me, that's on me, that's on me, we'll get it corrected. What was your sense there listening to all of them?
I mean, three old pros at what you're supposed to say when you're picking up the pieces 2 days after sort of a catastrophic failure. I mean, I think I put in the Mack packet, I said the word predictably. You knew Mack was going to fall on the sword. And I think he did it like 15 seconds into, hello, everybody. I think it was, I was watching the video back and I thought, I was like, oh, yeah, 15-second mark. That starts with me. I thought they said all the right things. You can't go back and win the game now. The game's lost. I thought it was interesting, and that there was something. I think Chiswick sort of beat us to it. I have wondered if this is going to be what you saw Virginia do, a 1-5 Virginia team that I think has a lot of limitations. I wonder if this is what you're going to see these other opponents do. Georgia Tech do. Obviously Haynes King, the Georgia Tech quarterback, can move. I wonder if you're going to see more design quarterback runs. Cedric Gray said it today. We definitely think we will. Chiswick said it Monday when we were there. I think he made the copycat comment. But yeah, I mean, I thought, just to answer your question, TA, I thought they said the right stuff, but it's kind of like, it really doesn't mean anything until you actually, like Evan was saying, you actually see who shows up in the dirty on Saturday night. I mean, I don't know. It's wild to think that this was supposed to be the soft part of the schedule. There was no reason. There was really no way to think they wouldn't make it into Duke at 9-0. A 9-0 UNC team going into the final 3 games of the season, playing for an unbeaten season. I mean, it was that was in play. But yeah, I mean, I thought they said all the right things, and obviously Mack sat down with Chip Lindsey about the running situation, because right out of the gate, Chip Lindsey was, pointing the finger at himself. So we'll have to see what kind of product shows up for the Tar Heels in Atlanta.
Yeah, Mark in the chat says, I want to see the coaching staff tell me how they plan to make sure this doesn't happen again. Well, that's what they talked about on Monday. And it's to Adam's point, you got to see it. It's got to happen. A lot of people gave a certain coach in South Beach a lot of grief about a catastrophic coaching failure that cost them a game. And I think, while certainly not quite on that level, it was pretty close. Let's look forward to this Georgia Tech game a little bit. Adam mentioned Haynes King. He's got a 70-yard touchdown run for a quarterback. And he's not Michael Vick, not Lamar Jackson type, but he can get quick. And Cedric Gray's all over it talking about it. How does North Carolina deal with that, given that Virginia had success doing it? It's a copycat league, like we said, right? But if you copycat it and the other team hasn't stopped it, then there's trouble. What do you think about Haynes King and this North Carolina defense, Evan?
Yeah, really quick, one last thing on Musket. Does anyone know how many rushing yards he had coming into the game on the season against UNC?
I'm going to have to bow out.
Adam knows.
Evan told me. So let's see.
I looked it up beforehand, but I don't know now.
I'll guess
let's 60, see if
65.
65 rushing yards. The correct answer was -12.
Yeah.
And
I knew
Saturday night
he
he had
negatives.
66. Saturday night he had 66.
He was at -12, guys, through 6 games.
Yeah, and he ran for 66. That is pure. That is a pure bye week. Let's scrap everything.
Yep.
Change
100%.
up everything and throw them something they've never seen.
Yep.
And it paid off for them.
So yeah,
Haynes King's a different animal.
Yeah.
He can run.
No, he's more of your true dual threat guy. He's rushed for 372 yards this year, which is second most on Georgia Tech and also second most amongst quarterbacks in the ACC. So he's a real threat on the outside. I mean, I know in the last game you mentioned that big touchdown run he had. He rushed for 150 yards in that game. He's an interesting player because he's 6'3", about 200 pounds. So he's almost similar to Drake in that he's that wiry, athletic kind of build, not nearly as tall as Drake, but just kind of that same build to him. The interesting thing when looking at how to defend him is over the past few games, he's really struggled in terms of keeping control of the ball and ball security. He's thrown, I think, 7 of his 9 picks in the last 3 games. So as far as defending Haynes King, the run is going to be something that I think this is a week UNC almost self-scouts and looks at what they did wrong in terms of containing Musket in Virginia, because I'm sure that's a lot of the tape that Georgia Tech will be watching this week when trying to attack this UNC defense. And UNC is going to have to find a way to get a lot of more pressure in the backfield, because when King is pressured, he's had issues turning the ball over.
Yeah, and I was just thinking as Evan was talking about Haynes King, was anyone surprised, Tommy, John, we got surprised to see UNC's an 11-point favorite on the road in Atlanta after they just totally gagged on that large of a spread. Like, I don't know. I don't know what I expected to see, but I was like, damn, 11. Like
I don't.
that's not free.
Vegas knows a lot, but I don't think Vegas understands the Super Bowl aspect and the history aspect. I don't think they play into that. They look at Bowling Green beat them to death or beat them by 11 there. They leaked out a Miami game, then they lost to Boston College. I think Vegas looks more at that stuff rather than the history of, like Mack said. I couldn't believe Mack said it, but he might be right. People should pick us to lose down there. Us being Carolina. I was like, wow. And I knew as soon as I typed it on the message board thread that it was people were going to be all over it. But I don't think Vegas sees that aspect. But let's ask John. John, you betting? You going to take Carolina and get up 11 in Atlanta?
I'm
getting married one of these days. He's going to blow the honeymoon money.
That's a dangerous number, too. That is a dangerous number. I do think Vegas is trying to be forward-looking. They're trying to be predictive. But they're also Vegas's goal is to put a number out there that gets some action. So a lot of people are going to see 11 and they're going to see, hey, you know what? That's north of a touchdown after what happened last week. So I actually go the other way. I try not to engage too much in any of that stuff because it's all dangerous, especially when you're betting on UNC football week to week. We just saw what happened last week with that.
You want to do the Johnny T-shirt read since you've been nailing it lately?
Oh, Tommy, it was awfully cold outside today, Tommy. And you know what I wish I had done? I wish I had gone to Johnny T-shirt and picked up a jacket because it's fall weather. There's a few more home games left in the year. Basketball season is starting. You need to refresh your wardrobe. T-shirt. They support Inside Carolina. They support this podcast and all the podcasts that we do. They're locally owned and operated. They have a store on Franklin Street as well. So if you're in town for the Campbell game or ahead of the Duke game, or anytime you're in Chapel Hill, be sure to stop by, get some of the latest UNC gear. We're going to take a break here at 9:28 Eastern. We're going to let the national guys pay the bills, as Tommy always says. We'll be right back with another half of On the Beat Live here from Inside Carolina.
Okay, boys, welcome back to On the Beat Live. John Bauman he's trying to take our jobs, fellas.
So smooth.
He can't take y'all's because y'all are the beat guys. He can take mine because I'm just the host of this stuff. And John, you're setting up well. I will say this: Johnny T-shirt was having a 25% off sale this week on hats, and those hats include toboggans, or what I call toboggans. I don't know what skull caps, beanies, whatever people call the warm things you put on your head. They've always been toboggans to me from Johnston County, but they are on sale. I was looking at them before we went on air. About to snag me some gear at Johnny T-shirt. All right. Let's talk about this game now. 11-point favorite. Carolina has struggled. Is it a bounce-back game? It feels like it could be either a blowout or a loss to me. What do you think, Evan?
Oh, gosh.
Pandora's box.
It just feels like it would be the most Carolina thing to go and beat the hell out of Georgia Tech after what they did last week. And I almost think that the loss to Virginia helps that become possible even more than maybe it would have if they'd leaked past Virginia.
I would agree with that if this game was at 12 or 3:30. I think with it being a night game, not that, I'm sure people out there are like, what difference does that make? But just something about night games in UNC. I think it's going to end up being a pretty close game that comes down to maybe the final quarter. I'm not going to go off and say who I think is going to win because yet, but I would be very surprised if after what the questioning has been like throughout this week, and when you look back at the UVA game plan, that Amarian Hampton is not heavily involved Saturday night. If you look at Georgia Tech's run defense, we're talking about how porous the Cavaliers were in run defense. Georgia Tech takes the cake in that department. They're allowing 227 rushing yards per game, which is dead last in the ACC and second worst in the entire country, only to the North Texas, what are they, Mean Green down there? Former stomping grounds of offensive line coach Randy Clements. So
Seth Luttrell was at North Texas too, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't he go down there?
Yep.
So I think it would be very surprising if Hampton doesn't get at least 25 plus carries, if not even more than that.
Tommy, I
can run the ball like the first 9 times.
He's going to run. I mean, Georgia Tech could build a brick wall and roll it out. They could roll the rambling wrecked car out there and put it, and North Carolina's going to run into it. They're going to run that damn football early.
What if UNC ran the triple option on Georgia Tech? No, I'm just kidding.
Right, Paul Johnson, back from the dead. Yeah.
What's up, John?
One of the things I wasn't going to bring up this point. One of the things I was going to say is maybe bring back the Wildcat. I know that sounds crazy to say, but that's we can save that for a later second. I'll tell you what I'm going to keep an eye out for against Georgia Tech. I'm going to keep a close eye on the snap counts at wide receiver for UNC, because one of the things that I was looking at from the untrained eye, I have to really go back and look at the film, but it looked like Tez Walker and J.J. Jones were getting a little tired out there, especially in the fourth quarter. Drake May had some time on that last drive. It's a little bit of a scramble drill type situation where you kind of have to be the Energizer Bunny and find space on the field. And, I think, Tez Walker played 80 snaps against Virginia. J.J. Jones played 78 snaps. Mack Brown has talked about building up depth at wide receiver. That's not something that UNC has really been able to do throughout the season. But that's something I'm really going to be keeping an eye on. We know that Tez Walker is a dominant receiver. So no one's saying that he played poorly at all, anything like that. I'm just saying he played so much. It looked like he might have been a little bit tired maybe on that last drive. UNC was putting a lot on his shoulders, and I'd like to see them sub more.
Yeah, John, I couldn't help but wonder, you're talking about the wide receivers. I couldn't help but wonder with Nate McCullum losing all sense of being able to catch the ball, the drops he had, just unreal. By the way, I wasn't even planning on mentioning this, but I just say everything that comes to my mind. One of my best friends of all time was texting me late last night. He's the greatest guy ever, runs a tire shop here in Mebane, North Carolina. And he told me that the suggestion was out there that Nate was dropping passes on purpose because he hadn't got his NIL money.
Jesus
I thought it was pretty ridiculous, but I mean, it's wild just to see where this stuff comes from. So I texted him back. I was like, so he threw the game, but anyway, I was going to say that, I think there was a guy, Randy M in the comments. We've had a lot of great comments tonight, by the way. These guys are insightful.
Yeah, I'm trying to snag them too.
I mean, really, the usual suspects. Jordan Falls has been all over it. Garrett Chapman's always all over it. My guy, Jonathan Triplehorn. I did think Rucker was going to kill me, Jonathan, there.
That was the most classic press conference ending ever.
But
folks, if you haven't watched, I got to tell them again, Adam. If you haven't watched Kamen Rucker's post Virginia, watch it. It's the typical press conference. Kamen's doing his job, answering the question. He's obviously not very pleased to be there. Understandable. And then Evan has the last question after he'd already started walking off.
It was me. It wasn't Evan, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, I said Adam. Sorry,
yeah.
Evan. I was trying to get the young guy killed. Adam says, so Kamen, you can go. The look was classic.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't appreciate the look, but I guess he didn't appreciate the will Kamen Rucker apologize to me? Am I going to get an apology from him?
It's typical MO from Carolina to apologize on anything.
Right?
So yeah, I think you should. But no.
Hey, a lot better than USC, who did not make players available after their loss to.
I actually said that to Drake today, guys. Mm-hmm. When Drake came to see us today, I actually said, I mean, Drake, he always keeps it light. We were talking to him before we started rolling. I said, look, man, thanks for showing up the other night. And I didn't say, and not shooting a death stare through my body. But, and he was, he knew that we were referencing USC, I was like, I don't want to speak for the group, Drake, but, I know sometimes you don't have to show up, and we appreciate you doing that. And he was cool. We had a nice little conversation about it. Just the USC debacle.
It's part of being there. I mean, if you're going to stand up and you're going to be happy and talk and cheer and say all these things after you win, you got to be there when you lose too. And Drake, he definitely understands that. And I thought that, that's a cool moment you guys had, even though I wasn't there. But hearing about it, that's pretty cool.
It was.
And
pretty
Drake
cool.
talks.
In my defense, I try to listen to what these guys say. I mean, really listen to them. And we heard Rucker say right before that, Rucker was sort of rolling through sort of like a checklist or things of what we have to do going on from here. And he said, whether it's this, whether it's that, and he said, whether it's positivity on the sideline. And for whatever reason, my old ears perked up at that. And so I was going to ask him something along the lines of, do you think you guys got too negative? Like, which is understandable. You get mad when stuff ain't going your way. I was going to ask him something along those lines because he had just said it. And I guess I didn't get it out quick enough because he was ready to leave and he got to leave. So, but in my defense, that's what I heard him say that. And I was like, well, maybe we could get some clarification on what you mean by that, Kanan.
And it's very relevant too, right? After what we saw last year at times. And I thought your question said today, Cedric's great at answering questions. The growth he's had on the field is one thing. The growth he's had behind the mic is pretty impressive for him. But, I mean, he said, of course, he didn't feel like it got to the point of being negative or, yelling at each other, directly. But, yeah, I mean, it's natural to get fired up at each other on the sideline. So I certainly think it was a valid question, one that probably tough to answer right after the heat of the battle, but a valid question nonetheless. So, yeah, I think you need an apology.
I was joking about that.
But, yeah, we do not hurt our beat writer, okay? I'm too old to do that stuff. I do not need to be called in the middle of the night and said, Adam just got taken out by the defensive lineman. Can you step up?
What would it be, upper or lower body, I guess? Upper, probably.
You'd be the first whole body.
Right. Out definitely instead of out indefinitely. Yeah.
Out for good.
Yeah.
One thing I thought was an interesting discussion you had today was John Copenhaver. I thought he was pretty interesting discussing his injury and things like that. I don't think people realize the importance of that injury on Drake himself, because we saw Cope become a guy, at times, especially against South Carolina, and he's out there catching that touchdown pass against South Carolina with a broke hand, which was news because I thought he broke it on that play. But anyway, just speak to that and that growth from him and that importance for him to get back into it, because he's a sure-handed guy. But he needs to be sure two-handed guy to be able to step up and really help Drake. Any word on when that might happen? He's getting closer.
Well, I think, if you correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't gone back and listened to it since we were there, but he's saying he still has pain. I think he said, he's still. I mean, obviously, you break your hand. Good God, but talking to him today, I mean, it's still, you feel like it happened a long time ago. And you feel like since he's not wearing that club, like he's playing for the Oakland Raiders of the 1970s or whatever, the thing looked like a big Q-tip, I thought. It looked like he had a Q-tip on the end of his hand. But, you sort of in your mind, you're like, oh, he's out of the club. Oh, you can see his fingers. Oh, he's catching passes. He's fine. And he had what was it? The Miami game? He had a huge gain down the sideline where he broke a couple tackles. Jim Hawkins got a great photo of it. The sideline's going crazy. But yeah, it was interesting to talk to him today. And like I say, I think he's still dealing with some pain. He walks around when we're there at the football center, he walks around with a brace on his hand. And I think it's, it might be one of those things where it's not right until the season is over, but, and something else, is how it affects his blocking, cause I think he's been regarded as sort of a complete product, whereas Nesbitt obviously is just such a talent in the passing game, such a matchup nightmare. I do think that Bryson Nesbitt's blocking has need to improve, but I think Copenhaver sort of gives you the the blocking and the pass catching and the run after the catch. He's great after the catch. So yeah, it's like these are things you don't think about when a team rolls out to 6-0 or rolls out to 9-1 like last year. There are these things you don't think about because they're winning, but that has been an issue that he's had to navigate. And I can't even imagine what it's like trying to play a violent sport like football with a broken hand.
Yep.
Yeah, and that, Adam, gets me to a point I wanted to bring up tonight. What does it take for UNC to have one of these special seasons we've talked so much about? What it takes is that the team has to stay really healthy. I think when you look back at 2015, that team was blessed with really good health throughout the entire season. And you kind of look back at this UNC team this year, you think, for the most part, they've stayed pretty clean, but Lampkin has missed some games. They
Mhm.
lost a starter at the star position, Boykins, at the start of the season. There's been some injuries in the special teams areas. Kobe Paysour, of course, is hurt for the year. So this happens to every single team kind of as the year goes along. But it's something that I'm closely keeping an eye on, just the overall health of the team as we proceed through the season. Last year, the season really changed when those two edge defenders, Noah Taylor and Desmond Evans, went out. That really changed the complexion of the defense. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on that. I think Copenhaver is another name to mention there. That's why I thought of it, because it's not really been heavily reported, but losing him as a pass catcher and a blocker definitely has impacted this offense throughout the first half of the season.
And that
Yeah,
brings us
I mean,
back
it's
to
huge.
the Nate McCullum thing. Like, I was thinking during the game the other night, like, I wonder what this would look like if Kobe Paysour was healthy. And, like, would they just pull Nate? They did pull him for Doc Chapman some, but they just pull him and stick Kobe Paysour in the slot? You know what I mean? Like, if he was available, would that have happened?
Yeah, I mean, you saw that happen when Blackwell against South Carolina dropped a couple balls. Now, eventually went back to him at the end of the game or late in the game, but they don't have anybody to take out. And it's kind of like they were talking about, like Lindsey was talking about. You kind of assume that we're going to do what we do and it's going to work out, but you didn't have an option. I mean, when you look at Carolina's wide receiver depth, we talked about this. If they get Walker, they get McCullum healthy, and Walker gets back out there, then this ridiculous receiver depth plus 3 tight ends. And now, you're basically missing Copenhaver. He's out there, but it's not the same. You've got Kobe down, and then you've got other guys. Doc Chapman made a play and all, but you've got other guys that hadn't really stepped up as much. J.J. Jones had some drop issues against, I believe he had 2 of the 6 against Virginia. So when you don't have the depth, not only the depth to keep people fresh, but the depth to, sometimes it's better to go over there and watch it. If you're struggling, go watch for a minute. You can't do that if you're a coaching staff and you don't have anybody else put out there. And it's all relative, and and to your point, Adam, which is a great point, you don't notice it when you're winning. The coaches might say they do, and they notice everything, but the players don't really wrap their heads around it until somebody comes up and snatches one from them. That's what Virginia was able to do. I've got a couple questions in the chat. Travis Cook, you were hot in the chat on the day after, blowing it up, but I will throw a question up here from you. Speak to the defensive line play. Adam, I think one of the reasons Rucker was not pleased to be there, and like I said, rightfully so, don't blame him, is the defensive line got pushed around against Virginia.
Yeah.
More so than they have in a while.
It was surprising. We were talking about it the other day, TA. Most rushing yards UNC has given up in 14 games. It's the most an opponent has had against Carolina since Duke, the Duke win in Durham last October. And I mean, yeah, like I went back and looked, and like Clemson ran for no yards on Carolina in the ACC championship game. Like I think Will Shipley had like 16 yards or something, because I was expecting, you go back and you start looking and you're like, well, this might be one where they gave up a lot. Like they didn't give up a ton of rushing yards at all to Clemson. So yeah, the defensive line play, and I feel like the defensive line has been one of the bright spots of this group. Would you guys agree?
Yeah,
up
100%.
until Saturday night.
It's amazing how the Tim Cross talk really stopped. And then the Tim Cross stopped. That's one thing about the fandom and the message boards and all that stuff that's fascinating to me, and it's part of it, and I get it, is how the different talking points shift and change depending on whether they winning or losing.
Yeah.
And you can see the collective after they lose to Virginia. Everybody thinks, "Oh, here we go again," and it's not one person it's not one person specifically. It's just like the wave of talking points, and I guess it's the same way with the media as well. You got media blasting off on Carolina's and all that, but it's just a fascinating thing. And like I said on the day after, it's one game. They've got an opportunity to rectify that and sort of play more free to some. I guess that was Michael Coe asking those questions. I did like what Armani Chapman said about that, though. He said it's more pressure. It's still pressure because now you don't have a safety net.
There's no margin for error, right?
Yeah, there's no coastal division where you can cruise in at a smooth 5-3 and play an SEC championship game. John, get in here.
Tommy, to that point, I think this is a really interesting question. I'm going to send this one to Evan. We send him all the hard questions. Chris asks, would UNC fans all be happy with 6-1, but nobody wanted the 1 to be UVA? So do you think that, taking stock of the season, if you're 6-1 with a loss to a Miami or to a Syracuse or to a South Carolina, things look a lot different, but just it's the fact that the 1 came against UVA?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I mean, even Mack, I think, brought it up in his press conference Monday talking about the idea of, if you had told us at the beginning of the year we'd be 6-1 through 7 games, I'm in 17th in the country, everyone would be really happy. But I think all these kinds of arguments go back to whether you're a fan, you're a player, you're a coach, you have to readjust your expectations as the year goes on. And this was the same talking point last year when the team started off 9-1 and finished 9-5. And everyone was like, oh, at the beginning of the year, if you had told us UNC was going to go 9-5 and play in the ACC title game, I think everyone would be happy. But it's again, the idea of you have to readjust your expectations. So yeah, I think it's an interesting point to bring up. Like the idea of being 6-1 is a good thing to think about, but when you look at this team and how they've played through each game, 1 through 6, and I think it's kind of the expectation should have been 7-0. And like Adam said, the expectation really should have been 9-0 going into a Duke game when you reevaluate and you readjust your expectations. So I think it's all, I don't want to go too hard here. It's almost like wishful thinking in a way when you kind of use that logic of, if you had told me this X amount of months ago, we'd be in this position, I would be happy with it. You have to readjust your expectations in anything. And I think that holds true for UNC in this case.
Yeah, I said that a lot last year in the press conferences, and, it was like, we're playing an ACC championship game, period. Fans should be happy with that. I agree 100% with readjusting your expectations. Because if you're trying to be 1-0 every week, then you shouldn't be happy with 6-1. Because you had a week that you did not do what you were supposed to do. And so that's an interesting thing. Looking forward here, North Carolina's got a tough one Saturday. I won't make y'all do predictions for that unless y'all just want to do that. But Ross is in the chat talking about the rest of the season. I predicted 10-2 going into the season, and I stand by it. And I told somebody in the restroom at Keenan Stadium – I mean, I love folks hitting me up, but I need to have my peace in the bathroom. I said 10-2. I said 10-2. I said 10-2. Now let me use the bathroom. But I'm sorry, folks. I shouldn't bring that up. But
how good is Evan, by the way? I mean,
yes. Change the subject, Evan. You're wonderful.
The kid, I love the kid. I mean, I wish I could say this guy reminds me of me at 20. It does not. I mean, I was an absolute moron then. Just great point. You do have
Evan, I'm in the bowls a lot, and people are coming up saying, is Evan going to be here?
Yeah.
Where's Evan? I'm not lying. Somebody came up to me, and I can't remember her name, and I wish I did. She came up to me and gave us a hug, talked about she loves the show, and then she said, so where's Jason Staples? Like, we're not good enough, Now they're doing it for Evan. I mean, Jesus, Evan, you're a rock star, man.
Along those lines, John sent me a hilarious comment from the last On the Beat. Someone commented, I think, on the message board saying, "Does Evan Rogers look like he could be another May brother?" So I don't know if that's a compliment or not. But
That's interesting.
I will say this: you would probably change your mind when you see me in person and see that I'm a tick under 6 foot tall. I'm not necessarily the same height as all those guys, but I do appreciate
Great framing,
outlook.
Evan. Great framing. Tick under 6
Tick
foot
under.
tall, rather than saying, "Oh, I'm 5'11," which is what you probably are.
I am 5'11". Well, really, I'm 5'10 and 3/4. I tell people I'm 5'11 when I wake up on the right side of the bed, and there hasn't been a day in my life where I haven't woken up on that side of the bed. So I'm 5'11".
The fifth May brother. Does 5'11" make you a short king? Probably not. That's
I like to tell people I am above the national average.
Yeah.
So I do like to tell people I'm not necessarily tall, but I'm not short.
So let's get Evan. He's turning red on us. Adam, how does this week play out? How do you see this Carolina team coming out against Georgia Tech? We're not going to talk about a score unless you want to offer one, but when do you think we will know if it's a one-off or a problem on Saturday night?
I'm going to say we'll know if it's a one-off or a problem with 3 minutes left in the first quarter. I mean, that's what I'll say. I don't know why that occurs to me, but that's what we're doing. Hey, you want to score? My score for the UV game was terrible. I think I had 41-14.
Yeah, really.
A little wrong on that one, guys. I'm going to say, I'll give you a score. Why not? It's going to be UNC 37, the Rambling Wreck of Georgia Tech 23. And Carolina wins to move to 7-1. And if you'd have told them they'd be 7-1 at the start of the year, no, I'm just playing. Man, I don't know. I mean, I think I don't know what to expect. I mean, do we see an angry Carolina team? Do we see, Drake May unleashing thunderbolts? Like, what was the deal with Drake was victimized by so many drops, but man, some of those throws he had, I mean, I don't know if it's the timing or the route or what. That was Drake May's lowest completion percentage as Carolina's quarterback the other night. 24 for 48, 50%, which, I mean, we know the guy was completing like 70% of his passes. I don't know who shows up for Carolina. I mean, they're going to have to keep Haynes King from running around like freaking Doug Flutie. I know that. So I'm saying 37-23. That could be dead wrong, but that's what I'm thinking. It's going to be a late night down there and, with the ATL skyline in the background.
Those 8 o'clock. Let me ask Evan a question in the chat because I promised I would ask this one. Evan, did you see Carolina was last in the ACC in punting? And who runs out there to punt the first ball, or does Mack just say we're going for it every fourth down? Is it Cole Maynard or Tom McGinnis?
I haven't looked at the stat, but I kind of assumed UNC was probably going to be last. I think they might have been last before McGinnis even got hurt or through the Miami game. I think Taylor Viplis had told me during one game that they were last in punting. I think, yeah, and I mean, it almost becomes if you're around midfield and you're facing a fourth and maybe 4 or less, 3 or less, it might become 4-down territory almost every series from here on out. I would assume Cole Maynard probably comes out as the first punter just because I think it's really going to be really tough for Tom McGinnis to kind of get any kind of confidence back, especially when you've got a punt that goes 16 yards. I mean, that's a pretty brutal beat to have out there. And I think that was one of the bigger storylines of the game that maybe I don't think has really gotten swept under the rug. I think people realize it, but it's not something that people are really talking about just because there's been so many other talking points with the run game and other things along that nature. But field position wise, I think on 3 of the 4 scoring drives that Virginia had, they started with field position at like the 50-yard line or better. I think one of the scoring drives, they started like their own 49, so basically midfield. And one of the field goal drives, they started at like the 34 or something like that.
The 16-yard punt they had, Evan, the 16-yard punt McGinnis had, Virginia did not gain a first down on possession when they took over. I think they gained 6 yards, and they kicked a field goal. Yeah. And it was the field goal, I believe, to go ahead. Or no, to tie it.
Tied at 24.
Right.
Yeah.
So it didn't even get a damn first down, and it was a scoring drive.
Yeah. And it wasn't a turnover. It was a punt. Carolina
yards.
just didn't fumble it or throw an interception. Get in here, John.
How about the punt coverage on that 16-yarder real quick where you had a guy jump over the ball? when it was bouncing back the wrong way. But anyways,
Grenade.
I actually have a stat for this. Tom McGinnis has punted 11 times this season. His yards per attempt is 35.8. So that's a relatively healthy sample size, 11 punts. A punter with a higher yards per attempt than him, Drake May, who has one punt for 36 yards. So I think that should show you right there.
Oh, Johnny, that's not very nice.
In
Tom
terms
McGinnis, I hate it for McGinnis because he's a
Yes.
great guy and then he gets thrown out there. I mean, how many times does your punter get lost for the season?
Yes, I don't mean to be mean. He's got a bright future ahead of him, I'm sure. But that is
We'll come
not
back to this in 2 years.
that is not what you want from your punter. Your punter should never have a lower yards per attempt than your starting quarterback. I think that sums it up.
To
Really-
the point is
really
North
last
Carolina
point.
dead last in the ACC in net punting at
Mm.
34, right below Virginia at 34.5. So it's been a rough go of it there. Credit to Noah Burnett, who's been kicking his rear end off on field goals and extra points. But kickoffs is another matter, and that's another issue. My side chat there, yes, Adam, that stat is accurate. Carolina gave up 186 or 184, 186 yards of hitting yardage to Virginia in that game, and you
Interesting.
lose the way you lose.
That's
Sorry.
unbelievable.
Interesting about the punters really quick. McGinnis and Kiernan both did the rugby style kind of a punt where it gives your team a little bit extra time to get down in punt coverage, whereas Maynard does like the traditional like 1-2 step and then boom it. So I think if there was a week where Maynard would get the starting nod, it would be after a full week of prep where you probably have to adjust some of your things when it comes to punt coverage, because as we know, it's not like UNC's kickoff or punt coverage has necessarily been the greatest this season. And when you're trying to maybe implement a punter who's getting the ball off quicker than a guy that does that rugby style where you take, a couple steps to the side, you're going to have to look at how to adapt to that to make sure you're not giving up punt returns, because Maynard's punts were not close to the UVA's punter who were kicking absolute sky bombs up in the air last Saturday night.
And the thing about rugby punts is if the guy comes up and catches it, the rugby aspect of it is totally gone, because you're rugby punting because you want it to roll. And if they're able to field it or you kick it out of bounds, it is not a good way to do it. It's an interesting thing in Carolina. That's another one of those areas. If you lose the special teams, you put the game in jeopardy. I'm going to throw a couple questions up here, rapid fire. What kind of game does McCollum have against his old team? Talked to him prior to the season for the Hills for Life interview, and it's safe to say he was looking forward to the opportunity to play in his old team. It's crazy he had the game he had against Virginia. I would expect him to have a big bounce-back game. I think we all can agree on that. You expect him to come out on fire. Jordan Falls says snap counts on the defensive line. I couldn't believe 85, 86 for Rucker in that game.
And real quick on McCollum, Drake said today, because we were asking him about it, that Nate sent him a text Sunday night like, hey, I've got you. We're still – Drake always talks about how much he loves Nate McCollum. Like, yeah. Drake likes everybody, but that was interesting. They said him and McCollum were texting Saturday night after the game, and then McCollum seemed pretty determined. He did not mention not having his NIL money to Drake. Drake did not Drake didn't report any of that, but I thought that was kind of an interesting nugget. They were talking about it a couple hours after the game.
Yeah, his controller, he had bad batteries in his controller. He'll get that fixed for all the Madden players that are Madden offensive coordinators out there. That was a good one, I thought. Y'all didn't even laugh. Y'all don't get it. Y'all don't play video games. If Carolina can still win the ACC, where you still see them ending up as far as a bowl game, if they win out and win the ACC championship, I think they're in the playoff, or it would be close.
You're going to need a lot of help.
I'll say
on what happens.
Welcome to Miami. They would be in the Orange Bowl.
Yeah. I think if they go to the ACC championship game and lose to Florida State or whoever it may be, as long as it's Florida State, I think they're in the Orange Bowl in that scenario as well too.
And a New Year's Six bowl game would be, that's a pretty dang good accomplishment.
Yeah, two
Long way to
Orange
go
Bowls.
between
Yes.
here and there.
Snap count, we hit that. Was the pancake holding call a correct call? That TD getting called back. Look, I don't argue about refs and officiating. I mean, kind of is what it is.
It
Didn't look like
reminded
a
me of
hold to
the Georgia Tech game last year. Same
Oh,
thing
absolutely.
happened.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Exact same. Was it? It wasn't. Who was it in that game last year?
Nesbitt
That's
got
right.
run over in the Georgia Tech game. I mean, he got trucked
They called
as
him for holding.
Elijah Green was hitting a home run, like 70, 75-yard touchdown run. He got trucked. He just held on to the guy as he was going. I mean, he got squashed, and they called holding.
Yeah,
I think this
so-
is different. I mean, that was Morales. What, didn't they send Morales in motion, and he sort of tackled the guy? Is that
He
that-
blocked. He blocked him, and the guy fell over, and he fell over on top of him. Is what I could see. I couldn't see
Gotcha.
whether he was holding him or not. I didn't watch it on TV. I was in the stands, and I do every time I'm in the stands and I see a long touchdown. First thing I do is look back for flags, and there it rested. Anything left, guys? We're over an hour. Shout out to the 199. Before we do this, I've got to talk about congruity. I always wait to the end because it's important that people remember this is the last thing they've heard from us. North Carolina-based company. They're national brand, but they're from North Carolina, and they wanted to partner with Inside Carolina because they know how important local and good support is for Inside Carolina, what it means for us and what it means for our fan base and our readership and our listenership. You can get your small and mid-sized business empowered with HR and payroll outsourcing so you can handle growing your business and they handle the wonderful people of your business. People make everything go. Congruity handles that aspect of it so you can grow the business. Top of the line technology, state-of-the-art online platform. They're obsessed with customer service. They wouldn't be a part of Inside Carolina if they weren't obsessed with customer service, and they knock it out of the park there. Darren and Matt and their team, just wonderful. And then they can transform your organization into this, and they can blow it off the map, and it can be just a wonderful small to mid-sized business and make you and take you to the top in that aspect of it. So do this for me. If it's the last thing you do, go to congruityhr.com/Tar Heels, fill out the online form, get your free assessment. They offer a free assessment, see what you need, see what they can do for you. And if you're an Inside Carolina person, you go to that link, congruityhr.com/Tar Heels. They'll take care of it for free and get you going. Any last thoughts, Adam?
Who do you think shows up in Atlanta, Tommy?
I do not know, to be honest with you. I feel like I've said before that we'd find out more about this team these 2 weeks than we would in the past 6. And they've got one more of those 2 weeks to try to figure it out. My sense is losing to Virginia will have them on fire next Saturday night. I wouldn't have thought that if they'd have just beaten Virginia barely. But I do think Georgia Tech's going to be tough. People can point to Bowling Green and all this, but Georgia Tech, something about that team gets up and plays teams well. They handled Miami's offensive line and defensive line, and were able to get that miracle at the end. But I don't know. Who you think, Adam?
I mean, I feel like it's going to be I don't know why I keep saying an angry Carolina team, but I just feel like I felt like they were pissed about how it didn't go right against UVA. I think the losing the unbeaten status or prestige is not the right word, but I think something about not being unbeaten really they did not like that. I think they wanted. I mean, I know everyone, if you're playing freaking peewee basketball, like I know everyone doesn't want to lose, but I think there was something really about being unbeaten and being up there in the top 10 that this group of guys really was fired up about it. I know that's supposed to show up in your performance, but I think it bothered them. But yeah, now you're picking up the pieces and seeing what you can take down to Atlanta. So I don't know. I feel like it could be sort of a breathing fire type situation, but I could be totally wrong about that. I don't know. We'll be interested to see.
Evan, what you think before we get out of here?
I'll just have to say, I think this is the game at the end of the year that people are going to point to as the tipping point this season, whether for good or for bad. Not the UVA game. I think this game is really the one that's going to hold a lot of weight about how these last I guess if you count the Campbell game, 4 regular season games go. I think if UNC comes in and wins this game, I think there's a good chance, and I think they would win at least 10 games in the regular season. And I think if UNC loses this game, I would be surprised if they won more than 8 games in the regular season, to be honest. I don't see how they get – I mean, I think they would get the Campbell game to 7 if they, in the event they lost to Georgia Tech, but I think they would probably go 1-2 in that final stretch if they were to lose the game to Georgia Tech. So I think this game is the big, I don't know, keystone game or whatever you want to call it in terms of how this season's going to finish. And in the wise words of Tommy Ashley, it's a must-win.
I think it is. John, any random stat that you have that we haven't covered, because you always bring them?
UNC is +8 in turnover margin. That's 8th in the country. That's a good number. My only call out, it's also a warning. If UNC starts to lose the turnover battle in some of these games, watch out. That's my closing thought.
That'll do it for this edition of On the Beat. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. Shout out to Adam Smith, who is on the fast track to Charlotte to cover North Carolina at Media Day, ACC Media Day. So check out his content on that. Evan Rogers knocking out articles after articles. No football press conferences tomorrow, so there won't be any updates on that as they are off to Atlanta later in the week. They defer to North Carolina basketball tomorrow. John Bauman, as always, producing it. I'm Tommy Ashley. Appreciate everybody that's joined us. Everybody stay safe. If you're going to Atlanta, have a safe trip. If you're not going to Atlanta, join us on Inside Carolina Live pregame. Join us on the game plan Thursday night. We'll have some things to talk about game plans with Jason and Greg. As always, folks, thanks a ton.